Hey, what is up guys? This is Nishi from MST.TV here, back with another Market Watch episode. So for today, we're taking a look at some more cards that are trending on the secondary market. Now with some of these, we have cards that are very meta relevant in the modern format. YCS Pittsburgh is this upcoming weekend, and we just had one regional's worth of results under the new ban list. So people are making some small adjustments to their lists to try to get ahead of the competition. But we also have some pretty crazy price movement because of cards being revealed in the OCG. We have all the cards revealed for Burst Protocol, as well as cards in the Prismatic Summon Box and Terminal World 3, so expect to see a ton of fluctuations over the next couple of weeks as people try to figure out what cards are going to be good going into 2026. Let's get started. Kicking things off, we have Despian Queritus. So this card is a level 8 fusion monster that is of course part of the branded Despia lore, requiring a Despia monster and a light or dark monster as fusion material. Now this card is a little bit more situational of an extra deck option, not being made as often as cards like Mirror Jade or Lubellion. It's more of a defensive piece that you want to bring out on your opponent's turn, as you can activate its effect on the field to reduce the attack of all other monsters other than level 8 or higher fusions to 0 until the end of the turn. Now this card does also have a floating effect, where if it leaves the field because of an opponent's card effect, you take a Fallen of Albaz or a Despia monster from your deck and either summon it to your field or add it to your hand. Now with the float effect and its fusion materials, it's important to remember that Quem is always treated as a Despia card, and Aluber is another option as well, so really solid options if your opponent does manage to out it. As I mentioned before, this isn't something you're necessarily going to be bringing out every single game, but it does take a spot in most of the branded deck lists that I've seen running around. However, that does seem to be just the pure builds. It doesn't quite make the cut in the Draco Tail variants. Now, of course, the card is getting a lot of attention right now because of the new Chronicle structure deck. The deck is reasonably strong and can be built extremely easily with just 3 of the decks and a couple of other cards, so naturally those other cards are trending up, and Queritus is no exception. This was a really cheap card a couple of months ago, as the original Ultras from Dawn of Majesty were only $1, and the 2022 Tin Secrets were 50 cents each. However, with all of the hype that the card has gotten recently, those original printings have jumped up to 7 each, while the secrets are up to $3 to $4 per copy. With Queritus, it's just like with Albion, which we talked about last week. I feel like it's inevitable that it will be reprinted in a reprint set soon. Right now, it's looking like that just might be the Maze of Muertos set coming out in February next year. However, until then, the card should remain fairly expensive over the holiday season, as people will get the structure decks and look to order the cards in order to complete the deck. That said, keep a copy or two for your own deck core, but definitely look to move your extra copies before that potential reprint tanks the card's value. On to the next one, we have another fusion monster. It's Secrereion Dragon. Now this is a pretty interesting fusion, requiring a dragon and spellcaster as a material. This card is a floodgate, as while it's on the field, your opponent can't activate the effects of special summon dragons or spellcasters that they control. It's also an extender, since you can target a dragon and spellcaster in your own graveyard, special summon one of them, and then return the other to the bottom of the deck. So this card is something that's easily made in the Draco Tail deck, since the deck consists entirely of dragons and spellcasters, so this card is often brought out in the mirror match. However, it's also sort of a problem for the deck to deal with, as the opponent can use Super Poly at the right time, fuse away the Draco Tail monsters, and make this card to stun your opponent out of the game. Of course, this has been a thing ever since Draco Tail came out, so it is a bit random that the card would be trending on the market now. However, the answer is actually the banning of Dimensional Barrier. D-Barrier was a card that made it very difficult to play Draco Tail, since the card literally forces Draco Tail to skip their turn completely and not really advance the game state at all. However, even with that, Draco Tail was a good deck, so the deck seems even better positioned to do well going into YCS Pittsburgh. That said, if Draco Tail is expected to be better this event, we will see more and more people picking up the card and the rest of the Draco Tail cards to play, as well as other people that are wanting to side deck Super Poly against it running this card as well. As a result, the card has shot up like crazy. This is a fairly new card coming out as an ultra rare in Duelist Advance. These were around $2 to $3 when the card first came out. It jumped up to $10 when Draco Tail really started to perform. However, over the last week or so, we've seen the card shoot way up, and Ultras are now sitting at an insane $25 per copy. We've also seen a big jump with the Starlights as well, which were $60 before. Those have now jumped to around the $85 mark. Now, since this is a brand new card, I'm not expecting it to be reprinted anytime soon, but it's very, very meta relevant. That said, I'm going to say this is a hold if you happen to still be holding on to them. I do think that the card could continue trending upwards in price a little bit more after YCS Pittsburgh, especially if Draco Tail really does perform well, though I'm not sure if it's going to be strong enough to compete with decks like Mitsurugi Yummy. I wouldn't be buying these at 25, but I think if you can get them for around 20 in trade, or maybe a bit less than that if you're paying cash, this is a card that's looking like it will be even more meta relevant moving forward. However, at the same time, if you do want to cash out at that $25 mark, this is an all-time high for the card, and I can't really blame you for that. Moving on, we have Void Apocalypse. So this is a pretty random one. This was actually just like a one-of piece of support for the Infernoid deck that came out much later than everything else. The card is actually quite good. You discard a card, then you get to send any fiend from your deck to the graveyard, but then you can also send it to the graveyard itself to send Infernoids from your deck to the graveyard up to the number of monsters your opponent controls that were special summoned from the extra deck. So yeah, this card came out a little bit later than a lot of the other Infernoid stuff, and then earlier than some other things, and it was at a time where Infernoid wasn't really playable, so this never really moved the needle for the deck. And then even when Infernoid did get that new support back in Terminal Revenge, I believe that Konami kind of banned original Sinful Spoils right around that time, so the deck never really had a chance to do very much since it couldn't cheat out Decatron nearly as easily. Now, however, Infernoids are getting some attention yet again. It's actually revealed with the Shaddoll cards that are coming in Terminal World 3. There's a card called Void Release or Void Liberation. Its activated effect is a search effect, so we don't care too much about that for this deck, but you can banish it from the graveyard to add any Infernoid monster from your deck or graveyard to your hand. So yeah, players seem to be pretty hyped for Infernoids, hoping that this may be an indication that other Infernoid support will be coming out soon. Players are gradually grabbing all of their Infernoid cards now before that happens. Now, while most of the cards have multiple printings, Apocalypse only has that one super rare printing from back in Eternity Code, which is a core set that came out back in 2020. Because of that, this card has actually shot up in price recently. This was basically a bulk 25-cent foil before, but we're now seeing the card up at $4 to $5 per copy. Absolutely crazy. With this one, I don't know if it gets reprinted or not. It might be something like an OTS common, but we don't even know when Terminal World 3 stuff is even going to be coming to the TCG yet officially anyways. And even if we did, I don't think it's really going to be meta relevant with just the one new card. Infernoid Shaddoll doesn't really sound like a viable deck with Grass still at 1, so it'll take a bunch of new cards for the deck to actually see any sort of competitive usage. That said, this is a really good card for you guys to dig up out of your foil bulk and try to move while the hype around it is still pretty fresh. Alright, here's a pretty random card to keep an eye on. It's Gouki. So for those of you that are familiar with some of the Time Wizard formats, you probably know Mizuki. Gouki, I guess, is like its cousin that came out a few years later. This card has a couple of really good effects that make this a solid generic zombie support card. While it's on the field, it has an ignition effect to send a zombie from your deck to the graveyard, and if itself is sent to the graveyard, you get to banish any other zombie from your graveyard and then special summon a zombie from your hand. So overall, this card does seem really solid. I think it's just we haven't really seen a strong zombie deck that's able to make use of this card for quite a while. However, it seems that the card is getting some attention because of the new Maze of Muertos set. We're getting some new cards based around Bones' deck from the anime, using cards like Pumpkin the King of Ghosts and its retrain, and then Call of the Haunted. They are TCG exclusives, so we've never seen them before. Some people are hyped to try them out, so even though we don't know exactly what the new cards do, it seems that a lot of generic zombie cards are getting attention, as people hope they will be good in the deck. Naturally, people are gravitating towards ultra rare copies of Gouki from Duelist Saga. This is the original print of the card, and it's actually its only foil printing right now. These were only a couple of dollars before. They're now going to cost you about $5 each. The interesting thing to note, however, I think is the fact that the card has two other printings, both of which are common, but each of those common printings has maintained a price point of about $3 per copy, which is a really good amount for a common, especially when those two printings were somewhat more accessible in the Zombie Horde structure deck and then an OTS tournament pack as well. I'm bringing this up because it's something that could possibly be very easily missed. I'm sure that I have a bunch of these sitting around in bulk somewhere. I had no idea that they were actually worth something until very recently. Of course, we do have to remember that there's a good chance that this card will be reprinted in the Maze set itself, so at the very least there's a good chance that those commons are basically going to go back to being bulk. I think that the ultras are fine to hold on to if you want to keep your deck in max rarity, but keep in mind, if the reprint comes as a Super or Ultra. That's another holo printing that's going to take away some of the demand for the original ultra rare copies because some people just want to play a foil version. Either way, definitely take a look and consider offloading those common copies if you can find someone who's really trying to buy into the hype. Here's another fun fusion monster. We have Borreload Furious Dragon. Now this is a dark dragon fusion monster, definitely one of the more obscure cards we've had recently. This came out in the Rocket structure deck, but was greatly overshadowed by cards like Rocket Tracer. However, this card is actually quite good. It requires 2 dark dragons to make, and it has a quick effect where you can target a monster you control, and then a card your opponent controls and destroy both. And then while this card is in the graveyard, you can banish it to special summon any Dark Link monster from your graveyard, but you can't activate its effect for this turn. So in the past, this card has seen a very small amount of competitive play. I believe that people tried using it as a super poly target before, but it was never like one of the best options to make. However, it seems that the card is getting some hype yet again. Now, as far as I can tell, I believe it's just because of the Dragon Link deck. We are getting a bunch of new Rocket cards in Burst Protocol, which is the next core set, and they all seem to revolve around Dark Dragons. So maybe Borreload Furious Dragon is something that you could situationally bring out, and you could use it to bring out something like Borreload Dragon, since Furious Dragon only negates the effect of the monster you bring out for the turns. But the negate would turn on your opponent's turn, so it's maybe useful there. Of course, there is also the possibility that this card gets used as a super poly target against the deck as well, especially if something like Pyramid Tsurugi is still running it. Now, this was a $4 card for the last little while. Furious Dragon just has the 1 ultra rare printing from the Rocket structure deck that came out back in 2019. However, the card has jumped up to around $10 within the last week or so. I do though, however, want to point out the screenshot underneath the price there, where apparently someone was buying like 1,000 copies of the card at $4 each, and that really drove the card's price upwards. So maybe be a little bit cautious if you are going to buy into this. I think that this is something that probably gets reprinted as a common in an upcoming OTS tournament pack or something like that, especially with Rocket cards coming out in an upcoming core set. Even then, when I was looking at some sample builds with the Rocket stuff, only a few of them were actually playing the card, so maybe this is more just an optional tech card. Either way, this card is too likely to be reprinted for you guys to hold on to too many copies. Maybe hold on to 1 copy if you are a very dedicated Dragon Link player, but definitely look to move these over the holidays as we approach the Burst Protocol sneak peek. And finally, the last card I want to take a look at for today is Chaos Angel. Now, this is something that we've looked at a lot on Market Watch over the last year or two. Chaos Angel is this extremely accessible level 10 synchro because you can use any light or dark monster as a tuner, and this card just banishes a card on summon, then gains immunities depending on what you use to make it. Now, over time, this card has seen a good amount of play. However, the card hasn't been played recently because Moon of the Closed Heaven was banned. This card was really easy to make with the Fiendsmith cards, since you could use Lacrima and then either Engraver, Necroquip, or a Bestial to make Chaos Angel extremely easily. With Moon banned, the engine hasn't seen quite as much play. However, the cards are getting some attention again as players are looking to play Fiendsmith in the Elven Notes deck. Now, this is a core set theme coming in Burst Protocol, and they are a synchro-based strategy. They're consistently able to make Armades, Keeper of Boundaries, which is a level 5 synchro that happens to be a light fiend that can then be used to make Fiendsmith Requiem. Because of that, we are starting to see Chaos Angel trending upwards. It has 2 secret rare printings, the original from Cyberstorm Access and then a reprint in last year's tins. And while they were down at $20 to $25, they've recently jumped back up to the $30 mark. Aside from that, we have just the ultimate rare printing. Those are pretty steady at around $35 to $40 with not too much movement recently. Now with Chaos Angel, this is a card I really don't want to hold on to. I know we haven't seen anything like it yet. I personally am convinced that Konami is going to give us a rarity collection type set sometime in 2026, and I do think Chaos Angel would be the perfect card to include in there, so I personally really don't want to hold on to more than 1 copy of this. However, there is always the chance that this card doesn't see a reprint and it could go up higher, as we've seen the card in the past hit like $60, $70. Definitely going to depend on your own personal risk tolerance. It's a risky card to hold on to, but it definitely could pay off if it isn't reprinted and the Elven Notes get a ton of hype early next year. Alright guys, that is all I have for today's episode. Definitely excited for YCS Pittsburgh at the end of this week. Also, we should be getting some more reveals for Terminal World 3. I absolutely love the Terminal World sets because I love seeing all of these older archetypes get support. I'm just like really nostalgic for a lot of them, so super excited to see what else is coming. Anyways guys, if you did enjoy today's Market Watch episode, please make sure you let me know by hitting that thumbs up button. Make sure you leave a comment in the comment section down below. Hit subscribe if you haven't already, and until next time guys, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV.